So we've heard a lot this summer from different voices on the nuclear accord, proposed accord between Iran and the US. We've heard from the neocons, we've heard from Obama, presidential candidates, the Senate, experts of various stripes. But I'm excited to have you guys here because you've studied the deal and you certainly know the politics around it. You know the broader Middle East context. Frankly, you also bring the experience of being Iranian Americans and kind of like at the crux of this relationship between our respective countries over the past 40 years. You've dabbled in details too, but you've also talked about those broader themes. I mean, I think after the deal was announced, you called it a new dawn, which is the kind of thing I would always feel a little leery about writing, because if it turns out not to be a new dawn, you look like the guy who was wrong. Did you have any hesitancy about describing it that way?
Maybe I'll let my emotions get the better of me there. It's pretty hard not to view it that way, though, because even if this thing falls apart, it's just the idea that it was struck, that Congress wasn't able to bring it down. It's kind of it's just sort of amazing that it even came this far. Like, that in and of itself is an accomplishment, even if next year the deal falls apart and Iran dashes and builds a nuclear weapon, and we all get a little egg on our face. Just that we were able to get where we've gotten, the fact that we sat down for 2 years at the table with this kind of arch enemy of America is pretty remarkable. And there is, I wrote about this right after the deal too. Like, I have to say, there is kind of something kind of special about being an Iranian American in this case, right? Because I've never set foot in Iran, but I have kind of this double identity. And I don't know if Nima has experienced this as much. She's also an Iranian American. Just because, like, I'm not sure if Nima as a name is as much of a tell. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Pretty big tell.
Yeah, it's a pretty big tell. I mean, Shirazi is like dead giveaway. But it's like, I wouldn't say I quite had shame about being Iranian, but certainly some people did. And it's like, I spoke to this woman who is no friend of the regime, right? She'd actually been imprisoned by the Iranian regime. And she was like, somebody asked me the other day where I was from, and I said Iran, and they said, oh, that country. And like, that's the kind of attitude that we have this split identity, right? It's these two countries that we belong to that are arch enemies. And like, yes, you have two countries, but it's not this isn't like being a French American or something, right? Like, there's a tension there, and you never quite get to be part of both. Like, Iranians in Iran don't really view me as an Iranian, and then like the circles I run in, I'm totally American, but there are still some instances where you run into things where you're like seriously, TSA, like, I was born in Los Angeles, for God's sake, and you're gonna hold me up at the airport every time I show up. So it's just like the idea that these two countries, which haven't talked seriously about anything in so long, can get together, and it opens up all these other possibilities. The civil war in Syria, everything that's happening there. We've known from the beginning of that war that Iran was going to be a major part if it was to end with any kind of diplomacy, but that just seemed off the table because we were in the middle of, on the cusp of going to war with Iran itself. And so now you see this other thing, and it's like, oh, wait, maybe it's possible to work something out there. I'm not saying, that's one where I don't want to get ahead of myself on. The most amazing thing about Nima...
I'm about to bring that up.
Okay.
Oh, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that you're like...
What is the most amazing
thing?
thing?
His name is Nima Shirazi,
really
which like has no hints of it. But his mom is a Brooklyn Jew.
That's right.
And so when people are like, oh, you just hate Jews to Nima, it's like, he's the real fucking deal.
Like, talking about bombing yourself.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. But you never pull that card out.
I never pulled the card out. I think that this issue and the idea that Iranian Americans view it one way, Jewish Americans view it a different way, Israeli Jews view it a different way, et cetera, winds up being really reductive and really tribal at a base level. My name, Nima Shirazi, sounds very, very Iranian. My middle name is Daniel. My mother's family comes from a Eastern European Jewish background. My father is, from a Muslim Iranian background. I tend not to talk about the fact that I, have Jewish ancestry, just like I don't talk about the fact that I have Iranian ancestry. It just happens to be my name, and I write about what I write about from the perspective that I write about it.
But you don't think that being Iranian at all affects the way you look at this stuff?
It's probably why I focus on this, why it matters to me.
But not the views.
But I don't think that it's because of the views, and I think you can see that because there's a gigantically wide scope of Iranian perspective on the government of Iran, the revolution, the Iran talks, our relationship with Iran. I mean, there is no monolithic Iranian community, just like there's no monolithic Jewish community.
Yeah, it's like that old joke about, I always tell people that joke about 2 Jews and 3 opinions. Applies totally to Iranians too. It's
Right.
like,
The deal kind of has been discussed on several different levels. There's the geopolitical side, there's the domestic political side, and then there's the deal itself. And it seems like a few of the people who've been talking about it, certainly folks you've been blogging and writing about, some of the senators who have been weighing where to come down, have actually been looking at the details of the deal. In your analysis, where is the split there? Where are the kind of pressure points and tension points that have been, convincing people to break one way or the other in terms of the actual writing of this accord?
Sure. Well, I mean, this is a very, very detailed accord. It's an incredibly long and well thought out, high-level technical agreement between Iran and 6 other countries, 6 major world powers, 5 of which have nuclear weapons. I think the merits of the deal, however, are being discussed, but within a very narrow framework by proponents and opponents alike. I think that when we see Congress members write these long posts, these long statements about the hand-wringing that they've been going through and whether they're going to support the deal or oppose the deal, it always starts from a baseline of Iran is a threat, Iran is going to be a nuclear threat, Iran desperately wants to get nuclear weapons, and once it gets those inevitable nuclear weapons, it's going to bomb the entire world, starting with Israel. All those things...
Sounds right.
all those things are allegations, but they don't have much basis in fact. There really is no evidence that Iran desperately wants a nuclear weapon. They have pursued a nuclear energy program that has dual-use capability as every other nuclear program in the world has. But for decades, Iranian leaders have been saying they have no interest in nuclear weapons, not that you have to take their word for it. And the international inspectors for years and years have established that Iran has actually never breached the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, to which they're still a signatory. And that even the minor violations that they have committed in the past are all kind of like a failure to declare, failure to do these little things, but that once those details are exposed, actually the Iran and the IAEA have put to rest a lot of those problems. So what you see in this agreement is actually a commitment by Iran officially to never pursue nuclear weapons.
A recommitment.
A recommitment, exactly, and basically the technical constraints laid down to make it so that if Iran were to pursue a different path, they wouldn't technically be able to reach that capability.
Right.
So
But I think a key sort of part of the background too, a kind of universally convenient misconception, is this idea that sanctions are what drove Iran to the table and to making this deal, and you've kind of exploded that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the many canards that kind of are repeated endlessly, that without harsh sanctions, Iran would have never come to the table, would have never negotiated with the West over its program.
It's funny, though, the whole political debate around this thing has really been not at all. I mean, you were talking before about like the technical aspects of the agreement, with which Nima knows like backwards and forwards. It's sort of incredible.
It's very boring and no one
to read his stuff on it, because like he's got the details down pat, and constantly like every little detail somebody gets wrong, Nima there is on Twitter like, no, actually it's this, and he's always right. It's really it's like quite a capacity for like holding all these technical details. And this man has no formal training as a nuclear scientist. But anyway, that's beside the point.
As far as we know.
I really don't.
In the debate over the deal, it was like this deal was struck, and we all kind of like turned to the nuclear experts and like just waited for a second to see what they would say. And the consensus was that like in terms of actually building a nuclear bomb, it's a pretty good deal. Of course, there are people who have no idea what the hell they're talking about, like Chuck Schumer, who still like had found problems with it. But the consensus among nuclear experts was that this was a pretty good deal, even to the point where a guy who was the head of an anti-diplomacy group is a nonproliferation expert, came out and supported the deal and resigned as the head of the group.
Right.
And Joe Lieberman took over because he's a real nuke expert. So there was like, we kind of waited for that. We got the signal and we're like, good deal, okay, great. And then the debate turned to all this other stuff like terrorism and sanctions relief and Iran's regional role. And that became the political debate. It wasn't even about the nuke thing anymore.
And so I guess that brings up the fact that there is a local side to the Iran Accord story, which is the local politics. Our Senator Chuck Schumer, one of the two Democrats to come out against the Accord, or to come out early about it, Menendez across the river. But he was the first one, I think,
he was the first one,
Menendez maybe.
No, he was Schumer was first.
Gerald Nadler, the congressman from the Upper West Side and parts of Brooklyn, being one of the major supporters, getting a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, boy, ugly. That was ugly.
Yeah, do you think there'll be recriminations from that? I mean, what happens after the Accord's done and all that stuff has been said?
No, I don't think there will be. And you saw, it was a weird micro civil war, right? The Civil War was between the Iran nuclear deal. You kind of knew that all the progressive Democrats who weren't like these Israel lobby stalwarts were going to support the deal. And you knew all the Republicans were going to oppose it. And the civil war that happened that was really important was between stalwart pro-Israel Democrats, which broke both ways, right? Like a guy like Cory Booker, who is cut from the same cloth as the Menendezes and Chuck Schumers of the world, really calculating politician, knows where his bread gets buttered. He broke for the deal. The counterpart of his Senate delegation from New Jersey, Menendez, broke against it, and that was the really interesting like little micro civil war to watch. And it does reflect on the future of the Democratic Party, but I don't think there's going to be long-term consequences. And it has less to do with the way these people broke on the deal versus the sort of diminishing power and bipartisanship of the Israel lobby. I mean, it should be clear to people like Chuck Schumer that who they sided with is just these like reflexively right-wing pro-Israel Republicans, and that's the direction that the pro-Israel lobby, we've had the advent of the liberal pro-Israel lobby, groups like J Street, and then, I don't want to give the short shrift to Americans for Peace Now, which has been around forever, but that's kind of the liberal Zionist lobby, and it's okay. Obama said this when he was running for office in 2008, and it was really a true statement where he said that pro-Israel is constantly getting confused with pro-Likud. Mm-hmm. And I don't consider myself particularly pro-Israel, but I understand that some people will be, and I think that's true that we've mistaken this right-wing view of Israel for being the only way to benefit Israel, and I think people are starting to realize that just because Israel is becoming an increasingly right-wing country doesn't mean that that's the only way to support it, is to be equally right-wing.
Right. I mean, to some degree, it's parallel, right? Everyone in America assumed everyone in Iran voted for Ahmadinejad, and everyone assumes that everyone in Israel is a Likudnik. So it's always difficult to psychoanalyze people, but we're going to do it anyway.
Let's do it.
The assumption is that the Chuck Schumers of the world did what they did on the Iran deal because their constituency has a lot of Jewish people in it. Do you think it's as simple as that?
I think that's not why.
So why?
I think it's because potentially his view of his support, and I mean primarily donor and campaign support, is going to outlast the Obama administration, obviously. His role in Congress, his position is going to be longer than this one administration, and he wants to keep up very good relationships with the people that he has very good relationships with, that fund his campaigns. I think that you saw people break in different ways. I think Menendez, Schumer, Cardin maybe, really broke in that way, pro-donor rather than pro-constituency. I mean, there was kind of a creepy infographic that the New York Times, going back to the New York Times, put up the other day, which
I couldn't get my hackles up about that.
Which showed a list of senators who voted for and against the Iran deal, and whether they were Jewish or not, and what percentage of their constituency was Jewish. And
whether it was higher than the national average.
I find that very creepy.
Yeah.
I find that a very strange metric to view this. It's very tribal, and it also kind of it conflates this idea that Iran is somehow anathema to Jewish people.
Look, the only thing you need to know that this is not about whether your constituency is Jewish or not is the fact that most American Jews support the nuclear deal by a larger margin than national averages, right? So if it was about how many Jews you had in your district, like if Chuck Schumer was worried about all the Jews in this district who cast votes, he would have supported the deal.
Right.
And
was that Booker's calculation, do you think? I mean, what?
No, I think
something
Booker's
like that?
calculation was about political ambitions and defying a Democratic president.
That's right.
I really do. And I think that he,
Same for Hakeem Jeffries, I think.
yeah, it's the people, look, has Booker gotten right-wing pro-Israel money? Yes. Is he going to keep doing that? Maybe not. I mean, he certainly transgressed some of his right-wing pro-Israel friends, and they're upset about it. But I think that Booker understands that in the larger picture, what he needs is the mainstream of the Democratic Party, which supported the deal, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, like these kinds of people, and also the large Democratic majorities in the House and Senate that supported the deal. I think he understands that that's what he needs.
Closer to home, Hakeem Jeffries was skeptical of the deal, expected perhaps to break against it, broke for it. Is that the same deal as Booker, someone who's thinking about his future in the Democratic Party?
I really do think so. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised when he broke for the deal. I didn't know which way he was going to go. I think political ambitions, long-term goals have a lot to do with this. This is a major legacy piece in the Obama administration. Breaking with this will follow politicians. Chuck Schumer, for instance, has decided it's going to follow him that way. He's confident in that. Jeffries, Booker, I think Yvette Clarke of Brooklyn, all of these people have calculated that this is the way to go for them, to support the deal, to support the president in this deal. But again, I think everyone winds up hedging their support because they are very quick to say in every statement of
It's
support,
not a good deal, but it's better
this
than the
isn't the
alternative.
deal I would support. This is not a great deal. It's just the best alternative we have. I don't want war, which wasn't going to happen anyway. And I'm supporting this initiative, and I really hope it works out. This seems like the best thing for now. I think that that's what politicians wind up doing. It's very political, it's very calculated, it's very savvy, and it's saying this is, I don't want to embrace this deal as the greatest thing that's ever happened, but also calculating that this is the way to go right now for their own political future.
Pick up on that. I've read that in your stuff, that you think that the threat of war has been
Completely exaggerated.
and fabricated. Explain that to me, because it seems to me that the explanation for why Israel is so opposed to the deal is that it removes a potential justification for attacking Iran. Sorry,
You did it.
I did it. Oh my God. So you really think that there was no threat of that? That wasn't going to happen anyway?
I really don't. I think that the threat of war was used consistently as a tool to increase sanctions, to do a good cop, bad cop kind of thing. There's the pro-war people, the people who are about to launch an attack, and then there are the people who say, well, let's do a sanctions/diplomacy carrot-stick approach. A decade ago, it was the Europeans who wanted the diplomacy and the U.S. who was about to launch an attack under the Bush administration. Then we heard that kind of shifted, and now the Americans, along with the other negotiating nations, are the good cop who want to try sanctions and diplomacy, and Israel has now become the bad cop, always about to launch an attack. We have seen this for years and years and years, that there's this forever threat of a looming attack on Iran that actually I don't think would ever have manifested. If you look at the history of who the United States and Israel wind up bombing, it's countries that don't that can't defend themselves. It's countries that don't have air defenses. It's countries that haven't been that have been effectively ghettoized by sanctions over years and years and years. You look at this, whether it's Gaza or Lebanon or Iraq or Afghanistan, and Iran just does not fit that bill.
But didn't Israel? They bombed an Iraqi reactor they suspected was part of a weapons program. They bombed a Syrian site they thought was part of a weapons program. They have launched that computer virus. It's possible that the Mossad has killed Iranian scientists, but they wouldn't.
Sure.
You don't think they were?
I think that a level of real attack on Iran just is an untenable thing. Iran is a gigantic country of people that would immediately come to the defense of their own nation, regardless of where they fall politically, regarding their own government at the time.
I wonder about it. I'm not so sure as Nima that it's all just bluffs and threats. And the reason I wonder, I mean, I've no doubt that the Israeli prime minister would be cynical enough to orchestrate some of these bluffs, but the fact that all these people, the former head of the Mossad, Meir Dagan, came out and publicly opposed an Israeli strike against Iran, and maybe that's just part of the bluff. Maybe it's all these double and triple feints, but I do wonder how serious they were about launching a strike. Of course, that strike was they never had the capability to really hit the Iranian nuclear program. That wasn't going to be the point. The point was going to be to draw America into a war.
Sure.
But I do wonder if they pretty seriously considered
I mean, I think that Netanyahu seriously wished that he could. I just don't think it ever would have gotten past that, his own warmongering
what,
desire
according
phase.
to the narrative happened, right? He tried
that
to do
he
it.
and Barak really wanted to.
And the chiefs of staff
put
in
the kibosh
Israel,
on.
yeah.
So I'm not Iranian, as you might have guessed.
You don't say.
But my memory of being a news consumer is inextricably linked to Iran, because I began watching the news when I was 4 in 1980 with my dad, and my viewing day would begin with Sesame Street and end with the NBC News. And so on Sesame Street, we learned about animals, including ostriches. And so when they talked about the hostage crisis, I, for years, thought it was an ostrich crisis. And I couldn't understand why everyone was so upset about, the kind of funny-looking birds. I didn't like them necessarily. I was always glad when that segment was over on Sesame Street.
Well,
but,
they're mean bastards.
I didn't see them as... But obviously, for a lot of Americans, the history of American-Iranian relations begins in the hostage crisis, 1979. But there is a prehistory to that, and I think that probably does have some bearing on the context for this deal. In 7,000 words or less, what do Americans need to know about the history of this relationship, and why can't it be translated better into some of the coverage of what's going on now?
Well, I mean, as was brought up earlier, the history did not begin on November 4th, 1979. The U.S., along with Britain, organized a coup in 1953 that basically ousted a nationalist prime minister, reinstalling the Shah, the king of Iran, to the throne. And over the next quarter century, the U.S. and the Shah had very close relationships, very close military and security relationships, and it was a brutal dictatorship. And so that obviously led to the revolution, and in turn to the hostage crisis, which a lot has been written about. I think what tends to be overlooked is that it didn't happen right at the outset of the revolution. It was a backlash against the Carter administration allowing the Shah into the United States for cancer treatment.
Right.
And the Iranian government and many of the people wanted the Shah basically brought back to Iran to face trial for human rights abuses. And the Carter administration's unwillingness to do that is what effectively set off the hostage crisis. So, there's a lot of really important history there. I think Americans kind of start right when it gets bad for us. Iranians start when it gets bad for them. And I think that now there's a potential to move past that, to see that there's a different part of history, that we're not simply stuck at that time at 444 days of American hostages in Iran. And I think hopefully this deal can open things up. I'm not that optimistic that a lot of the same old talking points will stay, that a lot of the old opposition will remain. But I think that on a global level, there is a chance to kind of break that cycle finally.
And I think part of that chance is because of what's going on elsewhere in the Middle East, right? I mean, as this deal was coming to fruition, it became clear to anyone paying attention that Iran and the U.S. were effectively allies in the war against ISIL or ISIS, whichever one you want to use. There's always been the fact that in going after Iraq, we were pursuing Iran, sort of one of their natural enemies. But that is a very difficult story for people to keep.
And in Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan too. But that's a very difficult story for people to keep track of, because in Yemen there's kind of a different alignment being pursued. For you, is there a thread that helps you kind of sort that out? Is there a natural basis for a relationship between Iran and the U.S. that has been ignored for a while, or is this just about sort of strange bedfellows?
Is there a natural basis? There's without Iranians are sometimes really racist about Arabs, and that's unfortunate, and that's not the line I'm trying to go down. But there is something about the Iranian nation is really old. It's not just this, a lot of these Arab Gulf countries are kind of like clans or tribal arrangements. It's not that. It's a very sophisticated country which has a nationalist sense. For all the restrictive laws about that are imposed on women in Iran, women play a very prominent role in society. They're more educated. They have professional jobs, and it's in many ways it's closer in its sensibilities to Western sensibilities than many of the Arab countries are, and so in that way there's natural partnership, and that was the basis for the relationship with the Shah. Basically, was that it was this kind of hedge against. That it was like the non-Arab
Oil producer.
American, oil producer ally there. And so that is true, but I don't want to overstate that too much, because it kind of does smack a little bit of racism. Even just saying it, I feel a little bit ashamed. But
do you think, I guess one way to think about it is Americans tend to distrust and misunderstand Iran and the Iranian people. Do Iranians living in Iran have a more accurate idea of what we're like, or is it parallel?
Well, I think Americans, we tend to constantly view things through the prism of how much do they love us? And, we hear constantly that Iranians are the most pro-Western, pro-US people in the Middle East, which is a tough neighborhood and a horrible place that we need to control. And so I think that that's kind of a funny prism. I think that if we stop thinking that everything is about us and start thinking about what's kind of best for the world, which obviously is not how politics works. I fully understand that. But Iranians are very well educated. They really understand that the American government is different from the American people. and that U.S. policies that they may disagree with staunchly does not actually wind up translating broadly, I mean, in certain cases obviously, but broadly into a populace that is, kind of reflexively anti-American. At the same time, I think that here we don't have that kind of scope of knowledge. That Iranian human rights, let's say, are used as a bludgeon by neoconservatives or by Iran hawks to kind of have the U.S. foreign policy pressure Iran on behalf of the poor suffering people. I think Iranians generally wouldn't want the U.S. to take that initiative on their behalf. They've seen what the U.S. does when they get involved in Iran, and it's overthrow their country and it's support a dictator. So, plenty of Iranians have real problems with their own government, just like plenty of Americans have real problems with our government. And I think that as a basis for relationship, being kind of more realistic, less strategically based would be beneficial for everyone. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. The United States talks all the time about our support for democracy and human rights, and our two number one allies in the region are Saudi Arabia and Israel.
What do you think the future is, first of all, of the deal itself? I mean, you've written about the fact that there's going to be potentially this kind of poison pill resolution or law to equip Israel with weapons that potentially could be used against Iran. Is that sort of the next step in the
weapons
political
that they
debate?
would need to do it, but not necessarily the capability to use those weapons. I mean, it's sort of an amazing...
Which are bunker busters, right? If you
Yeah,
explain.
And then certain planes that are only possibly used with those bunker buses.
Yeah, the only certain planes can carry them. I mean, this is getting into technical
Yeah.
stuff again, but suffice to say, like, there are the largest non-nuclear bombs in the world, and all these people now are saying that we got to give them to Israel so that they have the capability to attack Iran. But that would mean also giving Israel the planes that can carry them, which is like 2 planes, one of which we don't give to anybody because we have 10 of them ourselves and they're so closely held. And then also we need to like build Israel bigger runways. I mean, I think that stuff is just a bluff. I think that's
Do you think it comes back during the presidential campaign? I mean, is there an echo to the rather vitriolic debate over the summer? Or is
only
this end
because
now?
Hillary seems to be on this path where like Clinton just talks like she needs to be hawkish on everything to sound tough, but I don't think she needs to be because the Republicans are so goddamn crazy that like you can strike a totally reasonable pose and be like, these people are crazy, but I don't know, somebody has told her that she's got to keep being the hawkish one.
That's right. So we're definitely going to keep seeing this for the next year at least, and then I'm sure far beyond that. But the political campaign is going to get ugly over this deal, and it's not going to be necessarily anything new, but we're going to see a lot of political gambits over the Iran deal and who supports it, who doesn't. Obviously, we see from the Republican side that if you support this deal, you clearly just want to hand over nuclear weapons to the Ayatollahs.
No, you want a nuclear holocaust.
Oh, right. I forgot what Trump said. But then the Democrats need to strike a different, again, more hand-wringing, this is the best we can do for now. But rest assured, if Iran cheats, we're going to bomb them into oblivion.
Beyond domestic politics and even beyond Iran, what do you think the future is for non-proliferation? Because to some degree, the worry about Iran, which may have been concocted, at least reminded people that everyone has the bomb, and it's a terrifying thing. We have it. Israel has it. That's rarely talked about. Do you think that there is a path for more agreements to get rid of the nukes, or does the threat of maybe Iran having it, maybe Israel bombing them because perhaps they have it, once that's off the table, do we go back to saying it's okay for us to have tens and thousands of world-destroying weapons in our arsenal? Is there any potential for conversation on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that is also lost in the echo chamber of what we hear about Iran and the nuclear issue is that for decades now, Iran, as well as many other nations, have supported a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East, have supported this, I mean, strongly. And the reason why this never gets off just this kind of draft table is because the United States refuses to consider that as a legitimate option simply because Israel has nuclear weapons. So I think that this deal winds up strengthening the NPT and the non-proliferation goals that this world should have. It affirms nuclear rights. And I'm no fan of nuclear energy, but it is the way, it is legal. It is currently the way the world operates. I think there's a good argument to be made against it for everyone. But in terms of where we stand, Iran has just as much of a right to nuclear energy as any other nation who signed the NPT. And I think what we don't realize a lot of the time is that the nations that have acquired nuclear weapons since the signing of the treaty have all been outside of that treaty. Iran is in that treaty, other countries outside of that treaty. There has never been a treaty-bound nation that has built a nuclear arsenal. And so I think this strengthens it. It strengthens domestic nuclear rights that are held as inalienable under the treaty. And I think that as a non-proliferation accord, technically it's extremely sound, as you don't have to take my word for it. There are nuclear experts that have said this for a long time now.
Well, let's drink to that.
Cheers,
Death to
guys.
nukes.
Yeah.
Down with nukes.
Oh, we're drinking against nukes?
The debate over the Iranian-U.S. nuclear accord has obviously been a great moment for statecraft and eloquence and rhetoric in America. And so we're going to review some of the favorite statements that we've compiled. And you have to shout out as quickly as you can who said them. And if you get it right, the other guy drinks. If you get it wrong, you drink.
When do you drink?
I'm going to drink throughout
Okay.
the rest of the afternoon. Smart. It's my job. So first one, if I win the presidency, I guarantee you that those 4 prisoners are back in our country before I ever take office.
Trump.
Nima Shirazi. Damn it.
Sorry.
That's you.
Oh, shit.
I wouldn't support this agreement for 1 second if I thought it put Israel in greater danger. I know well.
Hillary Clinton. Damn it.
Sorry, he's good. Sorry. I know well, sorry, just to finish your quote because we want to get the full weight of it. I know well that the same forces that threaten Israel threaten the United States. To the people of Israel, you will never have to question whether we are with you. The United States will always be with you.
Hillary.
Yes, you're still right.
Still
right.
Hillary.
Still here, it will never change. Negotiating with Iran is like trusting the snake. You can try to be calm and reason with the snake, but the snake is going to bite when it can. It's absurd for us to consider that the Iranians are going to be anything other than what they are.
Huckabee.
Very good.
Is that right?
It's right, Mike Huckabee.
It was between Huckabee and the Saudi ambassador,
Those
but it
just
wound
a
up being
guess.
Huckabee. I'm gonna be so sober after this.
I know, it's going to be embarrassing.
do a hard one.
3-0, come on. Even though Iran's questionable activities are happening in the light of day, the blindness is great. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people.
Also Huckabee. Damn it. Do you want to guess?
Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. Yes. You should drink too, because that took you
I
a
will.
while.
It took me like
And-
3 seconds.
I like deep darkness the people as a
Yeah, he
verb
doesn't like dark
subject.
people.
Also a good band name.